of Clothing Brief. This, of course, is not to be mistaken with our podcast, Clothing Culture.
Which is not so brief sometimes.
No. But we like to keep this conversation short to give you insights on some of the trending topics in our industry. So let's start with the trade wars. You know, we've had conversations almost every week on this.
And people are having conversations every day.
Of course. But I want to hone in on one specific story in the impact of the trade war. We've had some conversations over fast fashion companies benefiting over de minimis, having some unfair advantages with importers like us, and because they are able to ship packages right on in. Well, now in response to this trade war and de minimis, companies like Shein and Temu are saying, hey, we're going to start raising our prices. And we're seeing a lot of impact there.
Yeah, I mean, the prices are going from like 2 cents to like 4.5 cents per swimming pool size.
Right.
Yeah. So, no, obviously that's going to make a huge impact. I think it's going to be a really complicated landscape. You know, when you're bringing down the size of government, and then you're dealing with 1 billion packages a year coming into the U.S., and now each one of those packages have to be certified in some way and taxed in some way. I think it's going to be a real big challenge, but it does send a warning flag out to groups that are bringing in goods in using the de minimis clause. And just to update folks from who might not have heard earlier episodes, de minimis is a loophole that's been put in by the U.S. government for, I don't know, decades. And it basically means a package of little to no value.
Under $800.
And now it's risen to $800 since the Obama administration as things get more costly. But anything under $800 that comes into the U.S., there is no duty, there is no tariff. And so it comes in really just at cost, where, larger volume importers, brands, importers alike, et cetera, are, hit with both duties, which have been in place forever, basically a tax on import, and then tariffs, which is an additional penalty tax. People that bring in under de minimis don't pay anything. It's basically zero. And it's become a massive opportunity. And that's where the likes of, Temu and Shein have really benefited with really inexpensive goods and large volumes.
Right. And, the knowledge that prices are going to be rising over the last month, American consumers have really doubled down on their products from these companies. There's been reports of Shein sales spiking 38%, Temu 60%.
When you look at those percentages up and you think how inexpensive those goods are, that is a lot of goods flowing in through the borders right now.
It is. So that's going to be creating some challenges of its own.
Yeah, I would say that there's this double-edged sword with making announcements, for the general industry and a professional courtesy for the U.S. industry, things like tariffs, adjustments in de minimis, there should be this time to be able to make, goods that are in work, clear those, get them in, and then tariffs take effect. But for when you do those announcements, obviously groups that are taking advantage, let's say, of de minimis, they're going to increase massive volumes to get them inside the country before tariffs take effect. And so you've got this major surge. And I'm sure that surge is occurring also through from goods coming from China into Tijuana, where those big warehouses are. I'm sure warehouses are filling up in advance of this whole de minimis issue.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next story. Google has gotten itself in a little trouble. This multi-billion-dollar business was just, there was a case ruling that they've been monopolizing ad tech markets. Let's break this down just a bit.
Yeah, I would say, monopolies and large companies there's always been cases throughout history, Southwestern Bell, AT&T, phone companies like that. As they get bigger, they tend to have larger advantage. The strength of them as a company, they're shutting out competition. That's exactly what was happening with Google. Competition would try to come to the table. There may be other alternatives in terms of
Other
digital
platforms, yeah.
advertising. And because Google really is one of the largest Goliaths in the industry, they were really
Mhm.
closing out that competition.
And that's really challenging for brands and retailers. I mean, the whole online advertising space is complicated enough already. So
Yeah.
having to battle through a monopoly can.
Well, and in a free trade environment, that's really the whole conversation's about breaking up monopolies and not allowing them, is that there should be competitive trade, and competitive trade balances cost or
Mhm.
helps make things more affordable. When you have a monopoly on a particular channel or a particular advertising, element, they can charge whatever they want, right?
Mhm.
There's no one competing.
Right. On to the next story. There have been a lot of government cuts made in this Trump era. A lot of organizations have lost their funding. Among them are organizations that protect human rights in the factory manufacturing supply chain in our business.
Yeah. USAID is one of the big cuts that's going on. And, I have a lot of conflicting feelings.
Yeah.
Being in Ethiopia for a number of years, working with USAID there, I felt like it was a challenging relationship.
Mhm.
I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to grow, a stronger business there. And I did not get that much help. And NGOs have had their own share of challenges in
Mm.
the country, planting their own ideals on the country, not
True.
engaging in the culture. And how effective are these kind of things that are going on um, in Africa, and specifically Africa? USAID is
Mm.
all over the world. There's a lot of dollars being spent. And so re-looking at USAID and its impact in different areas is important. We have to realize that as we abdicate, especially when I was in Africa, as China's aggressively
Mhm.
building roads in Africa, telecom, building all those, as we back off from our efforts to make lives better in certain areas, that creates a vacuum. And
Yeah.
that vacuum can be filled with other countries,
Can create
therefore
opportunity
reducing,
for others.
yeah, it
Right.
reduces our impact. And so it's a really challenging situation. The estimates are is that when on January 20th, we I think we cut staff from like 10,000 workers in Africa to 300.
Oh.
We've reduced overall investments in USAID and in Africa, and they say that'll impact about 5.7 million Africans and bring them to extreme poverty levels, which is about $2.70, I think, a day or something. It's pretty low, and I think we have to be careful. I did read an article that there's like a 90-day moratorium on the more humanitarian life-saving efforts, because a lot
Okay.
of people are raising conversations and concerns about part of what USA does is it's providing food
Mm.
to African and other countries, but in this case, we're talking about Africa. And so they put a 90-day moratorium on that, allowing food to still kind of flow through there. But
Okay.
it is such a complicated landscape. So this
Right.
is one where I think there's definitely two sides to every story. Being in Ethiopia, USAID still even today the largest investment in all of Africa from USAID is Ethiopia. It's about 1.7 billion. Um, and it does a lot of things. It builds health initiatives. It's supposed to support business. I think I had a little bit of a challenge there. And so let's see what happens on that scope.
Well, one of the organizations that is relevant to our industry is Better Work.
Yeah,
This is an organization that does have, feet on the ground, making
yeah.
sure that, things are,
Especially in our
yeah.
industry, social services, making sure that they're following the rules
Mm-hmm.
and regulations, human rights, things like
Yeah.
that. As USAID is cutting and we see challenges there, there's also opportunities for Africa. And I saw
Right.
that opportunity when I started traveling there in 2000, and then subsequently spending about 3 years in Ethiopia later. Is that as tariffs are taking hold in all these other places, in our industry, that's driving costs much higher. The
Mm-hmm.
US consumer is going to pay that burden, but it also slows down the economy. It slows down those. And so all of us who work in this industry are always looking for new opportunities for less expensive labor, maybe lower tariff issues. And Africa seems to be one that can benefit
Well
from that
poised.
in
Right.
certain countries in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Lesotho is particularly hard hit in the original formulation, but I really believe that the initial tariffs that we saw were sort of a shock and awe as to get people to the table. The mathematics, the formulations made absolutely no sense. Now that we've retreated to 10% kind of across the board for 90 days, I believe that might have been the original intent
Cool.
anyway.
Yeah.
Shock the world, bring it to 10%, take more, tax in.
Right.
And so we'll see what happens in Africa based upon tariffs and whether
Yeah.
that does continue to provide opportunity
Well,
there.
that the country is, or that continent is experiencing rapid expansion. There's projections indicating that it could reach, 15.5 billion exports in 2025. So there's good growth and good opportunity there.
Yeah.
Moving on, this is Earth Day, by the way. Happy Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. And
Boy,
so
how old? How many candles would be on that cake? A lot of candles.
quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about something that is, really focused on our Earth and maybe a challenge that our industry brings to it. Zara and H&M have recently vowed to reduce their cotton. And because there has been some scrutiny that a very well-known um, company in this space that provides cotton has been linked to deforestation. And so, terrible, right? That's a terrible conflict. But you look at the other side of the conversation, and the alternative is okay. So that just means we're going to amp up our synthetics now, and synthetics have its
Own problem,
own problems with our earth.
such as the complexity of our business. As
Yes.
long as demand is there, people have to find new ways to fill that demand. This particular story is really talking about a unique subset of cotton. We always talk about sustainability, and there's a certified class of cotton called
Better
better
cotton.
cotton. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a certified organic version of cotton. So you think, man, I'm doing great things. Well, to
I've
grow
seen
that
those name
cotton,
tags on a
yeah, of
lot of
course.
garments. Yeah.
To grow that cotton, you've got to have fields to grow the cotton. And the story kind of came out where they were buying better cotton with all intent to do this better, more sustainable kind of approach.
Organic. It sounds good. Yes.
But the company was linked to deforesting rainforest in the Cerrado region of Brazil to create more fields to plant better
Oh my
cotton, which
gosh.
has a much larger impact on the ecosystem. So, we've heard stories like recycled PET and recycled poly, and how we traveled in India and they were
Yeah.
actually building bottling plants to be able to recycle
The
bottles
for the
to
yeah.
claim recycled. This is one of those things where it's a pretty complicated landscape because people think they're doing good
Yeah.
and then they get linked to that. And I would tell you, these are the other things where I think, you know, I haven't taken the time or the ability to sit there and talk to Czar and H&M, the right
Yeah.
people about that. I would say that the intent was there. They probably have somewhat of a backlash with, greenwashing
Yeah.
or whatever else. But I think the intent was pure, that they were trying to do better things. And then you see the supply chain issue
Yeah.
now causing challenges. And I don't want this to slow down
Progress.
the sustainability train, but it certainly is an interesting wrinkle.
It's true. There's always this contradictory argument between sustainability and greenwashing. And in fact, I have a white paper on that we're going to be rolling out pretty soon. That if people want to dive in and learn a little bit more about that, we'll make sure that you can find that on our website. So our final story, we're going to talk a little TikTok today. Right now, they have launched into this trade war battleground as manufacturers, apparel manufacturers, and luxury good or factories that claim to make luxury goods for these uber luxury companies are coming forward saying, hey, we'll provide you really cheap versions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's been around. Counterfeit's been
It has been
around, or
around.
manufacturing's been around. The larger, luxury companies are saying, hey, we're not making
Right.
in those countries, but it doesn't stop people from making great
Hmm.
knockoffs and selling them direct to consumer. And so,
Right.
again, we'll see. Is TikTok going to be around to even have that challenge pretty soon?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I've, talked to companies in the past that have said, we know that these knockoffs are out there, and actually it's almost like free advertising, when people are carrying your brand around. And let's face it, not everybody can afford the $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 bags. So it is an interesting thing. And this trade war is kind of um, uh, the fact that these companies are now have this new opportunity. There's this growing trend, and that's on the rise in sales right now.
Yeah,
So
of
pretty
course. Yeah.
interesting. Well, thank you for joining us for this recap of what's been trending in our industry in the last week. We will be back. Actually, next week we are traveling to meet up with some clients. So we're going to make sure at noon at this time to roll out a reel of the news highlights, but we'll be back the week following. And that week following is a special week for us because guess what? Our next season is about to drop of Clothing Culture.
That's great.
So do not forget to subscribe so you can stay apprised of upcoming episodes, our new launch, and of course, stay in tune with our clothing briefs. We'll see you next time.